trouble. I don't know how often I should meet my supervisor and what I can ask him. Because on the one side, he grades me on independence, but on the other side, I obviously need help with certain things.
Yeah.
So for me, it's also a lot of like SPSS struggle.
Yeah.
And I ask, you know, older students or something, but they also can't figure it out or stuff. And then I would ask him, but for him, everything is so clear, it's a ridiculous question.
Yeah.
So it will definitely grade down both my independence plus like other things he's grading me on.
Yeah.
So I find that like a hard balance. Also, how often can I come to him?
Yeah.
Can I ask him this question, even though I see in his face he's laughing at me, but I can solve it myself?
Yeah. Well, I think that more than necessarily the amount of questions you ask them, it's how you ask them and how frequently. So you can have 5 questions, but if you ask them all in one meeting that you planned beforehand, I think that's less problematic than every time you reach something, you send them an email, I don't know how to do this, I don't know how to do that, and every time you come up with any little roadblock, you knock on his door. So maybe I think that the best thing you can do is try to work as far as possible where you can, like you're doing already, ask other people. But if you really can't figure a few things out, just make sure that the one time you're going to go ask him the question, you have everything put together. And you just ask him once a large majority of things, rather than multiple times small things.
But that's a little bit the question with, for instance, SPSS, that you can't go further. You know, if you're stuck, you can't do the next 4 steps because you don't have the data.
Well, do you have another professor that's not your supervisor that knows about SPSS?
Yeah.
Or YouTube.
Yeah, YouTube also helps
Yeah,
us.
of course, I tried that. And how often did you meet with your supervisor? Like, let's say when you were actually writing properly?
Well, I met with my supervisor when I got the topic and the idea. Then I met with her once more when I had my first chapter, and I told her I was too busy to work. Then, in the end, I met her once to tell her, I got this brilliant idea about migration law, and she was like, but we work with nationality law, and I was like, but migration law is amazing, and she was like, I don't know what you're talking about, and I was like, just let me do what I want to do. And she was like, I trust you, and then I literally locked myself up in the library for a month, and then I came up with a final draft, like a draft, you know?
Mm.
And then when she saw the draft, she's like, this is what you mean. I'm like, yeah. And then she was like, okay, but all this needs to go. You need to restructure the whole thing, so go rewrite it. So I think that she had a lot of work to do during the last month because she had to read 2 whole proposals twice, like not proposals, but 2 whole theses twice. Like the first one was 80 pages, which was too much, which was why she was like, all of this is irrelevant, all of this is relevant, and change your structure, and I had to go rewrite it. But every process is different. If you're struggling with SPSS, try to find other people that know about statistics within the faculty, not students, but like professors. There's more than one statistics expert in the faculty besides your supervisor. So.
Don't regress from your supervisor. Don't stay away from him or her.
Exactly.
If you have questions, you have to step up.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you start fooling yourself. I mean, you think you can do it yourself and you make the mistake that Veronica made it, and just think I can do it myself without the help.
Yeah.
And I promise you, you will come back with a package of work that you have to redo or reorganize. So
but that's
make
also
use
the advantage
of your supervisor.
of starting early with your supervisor as well. Because
and if you need a lot of supervision, then tell him. And you can make arrangements. Some people need a visit every 4 weeks, and someone else needs more short-term deadlines. Just explain what you need, and then you can come to an agreement about it. And then you can stick to something, from both sides.
So I have like 1 minute left. Is there any other very urgent, burning question that I can answer?
Is your question? Would you consider if people started working on their thesis like now, is it then early or is this already late?
I don't think there's early or late. There's finishing, right? And there's more peaceful and more like last-minute violent ways to finish your thesis. And if the reason you don't want to start now is because you think I'm too busy, then start now. Because you're not going to be less busy, you're going to have exams and maybe resits, and then everything's going to be hinging on that last month. So it's about just starting as early as possible. If you could have started last month, you should have done that.
Well, I'm a second year, so
No, I know.
So very early.
Yeah, but you could start thinking about a topic, start thinking about a question you would like to look into. And that helps you collecting literature. You're welcome. Yes?
At the moment that you and your supervisor both say, well, it's pretty much finished now.
Yeah.
The process afterwards, because I think there's like a second reader that has to grade it.
Yeah.
The process afterwards until the point where you actually get a paper that says like, hey, you finished it. How long does that process take?
It depends on your readers.
All right.
For me, well, it's not supposed to take longer than a certain amount of time, but for me it took over a month for me to get my thesis grade,
Well,
which I don't mind as much because I still got my grade at the end, and it was before the deadline so that I could still graduate,
yeah, okay.
but realize that they might be very busy too. Professors are busy people, so if you literally hand it in with just the amount of time necessary for the final version to be checked, you have your grade and you can graduate. Just plan for issues as well, like plan ahead. Plan, okay, by the 1st of a certain date. Don't, if you're still working on it in July and you're finishing mid-July, you're definitely gonna run into issues with them checking it in time.
Yeah, okay.
That's about as late as you can get.
Yeah,
All right.
that's,
July,
that's
because there's
super
people
late.
have vacations too
Yeah.
sometimes. You know?
They have vacation, they have a life, they have their own work, they need to write their own papers and publications. So that's something to take into consideration.
Student administration wants your grade by August 1st.
Yeah, okay.
Because they need, they say, 3 weeks to digest everything in the administration.
Yeah, okay.
And also just trust your supervisor. Their advice is really weird sometimes, but just trust them. So I think my thesis was hinging on total disaster and me passing, and I ended up passing like with a good grade, and then afterwards like I got the UNHCR award with my thesis, which is really cool, but it just means that if I had just done like what Janelle says, just gone my way or the highway, and in the end I wouldn't have made all the changes they asked me to make, maybe my thesis would have been worth a lot less. So that's also something you can't adapt your thesis. The whole point is to rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it. So even when you think you have your last draft, you're going to probably rewrite it 4 more times, either with structure or little details or references. But every last rewriting is really worth it. Yeah. I think I'm out of time.
Yes. If there are any more questions, you can still ask them after the presentation of Edwin. I would like to just applaud. Thank you very much. I think it is very helpful for our students. Yes.
I was just wondering, are we going to get like general information, because that's actually what I want to know.
Of course, if you want to know something general, you can always ask.
Well, just things like when's the deadline and how many pages and that kind of stuff, because that's
Yeah,
what
I'll-
the supervisors ask us.
I'm here. After the next presentation, I'll be here to answer questions, so you can
Okay.
just fire your questions.
So for the record, we will first have the presentation.
Did you post the Turkish?
Yes.
I'm fine, I like it. It feels like something.
So, if I may have your attention again, we will first start with our next speaker, Edwin. He will talk about his thesis. Afterwards, you can ask questions to Edwin, and then we will have time for general information and general questions to know. So I would like to give the floor to Edwin.
Also, I think that you have a form with the deadline and everything in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, my
I'll
presentation.
post it in the study aid, because it's like a packet.
Yeah, 1st of August. Yes. Okay, so what am I going to talk about today? I have an introduction, I have some cool pictures, put that to the side. And we're going to talk about the what of your thesis, the why, the how, the when, and what else is essentially just questions. So my name is Edwin, I'm doing the research master in law, just as Veronica. And I did my thesis last year, so it's still fresh in the back of my mind, the process and struggle. So I hope I can help you guys today. Start with the first thing. Okay, so I wrote my thesis for the law major. I'm not sure if there are many law majors in here, but I think in essence it's kind of the same as the other majors. You're just writing a huge paper and you're just doing more effort this time. I wrote it about constitutional review in the Netherlands. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with that theme, but does not really matter for this time being. In essence, I was just examining what the powers of the courts are in the Netherlands, how they behave, and that sort of stuff. I had my research question, which was as follows: to what extent would the fundamental rights laid down in the basic law of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, which is the Constitution, but just a fancy word, gain importance through the implementation of constitutional review by courts? Well, I must say this was not entirely my own topic. I had an idea of what I wanted to do. I wanted to write about constitutional review because I thought it was an interesting topic, and I learned about it during the comparative constitutional law course. Comparative? No.
Political institutions.
Yes, that course, I learned about it, and I thought it's an interesting topic, so I went to Gert-Jan Leeknecht, who is a professor, and also your academic director or something.
Yes.
So I talked about the topic with him, and I asked him, is this a good topic? And essentially he said, no, it's not a good topic. Too many people have written about it before, and it's dull, and it's lame. So I had to think of something new, but I didn't really know, and I just asked him his advice. In essence, that's what happened. So I said, what do you think? What is a good idea? And that really helped me, because he had lots of good ideas, which is pretty common for a professor. So that really helped. And yeah, there was more of a feeding process, so I just asked him, what do you think is smart to do? And then he gave me some input, and that helped. But that's just more of a personal process. If you really don't know, just ask your professor, what do you think would be a good topic for me? And that can help as well. So this was my table of contents. It's pretty huge. I thought I had only 30 pages, but in the end I had 55 or so that's pretty big. For the rest, it doesn't really matter, but just that you have an idea. This was 55 and it was more than enough. Yeah. So I had 55 pages, which was more than enough, but you can also have less or more. It really depends per paper and what you write about, actually. If you have an empirical study, then of course you can have less pages, but this was more legal topic with more information and background information, so that takes a bit. I asked Gert-Jan Leeknecht, my supervisor, if he had any advice for you, and then he said that the main problem with liberal arts people is that they continue at the upper stage. You know, when we had the introductory speeches for liberal arts, they say that liberal arts is like, you start very broad and then you narrow down, but the problem with most thesis people is that they don't actually get to the lower stage, so they still want to look at everything from every direction and every angle, which is not a good idea. So try to find something more specific this time. You can still do an interdisciplinary research, but just try to be a bit more specific, which can also, of course, which you can do in cooperation with your supervisor. Another advice that I want to give is don't take everything for granted, in the sense that often you read theses where people say, this is wrong, this should be the case, this is what is the case, this is, but often that's not so very true in the end. Lots of facts that we take for granted are no real facts, so try to acknowledge that and try to be a bit more considerate about that kind of things. So most facts that we research, for instance, constitutional review in the Netherlands, and then I write about it, that you should acknowledge that it's your own opinion and that you're not the only one with an opinion. So lots of times we think that we have facts, but it's pretty difficult. The why question. Why do we write a thesis? This is essentially something that you have to write down in your methodology section. So why do I want to do this? And also think about it for yourself. Do I want to reflect on something? Do I have a normative stance on this? What is my aim? What do I want to achieve? Something that you have to think about in advance. For me, it was just to understand some more of the system, of the legal system in the Netherlands, and that was my main goal. But of course it can be anything. You want to achieve equality between men and women, or you want to achieve, those are a bit high standards of course, but at least it's good to think about what you actually want to do and why you want to do it. Okay, does anyone know who this guy is? No? It's Methods Man.
Yes.
And the reason why I put him there is because he's an often forgotten rapper, and methods are also often forgotten with us. It's really an important factor of your thesis. Really think about what you want to do and how you're going to do it. So in the methodology, you don't necessarily, I think it depends, but you don't necessarily have to go in great detail on the specific approach or functionalism or that sort of theories and all, but just write about how you're going to do it and why you're going to do it and that sort of stuff. Just write everything down, justify it. It's really important for the reader to know exactly what you have done. And often you take it for granted, but you just write it down, but it's really important to think about. Also acknowledge your sources and write why you have chosen the sources, or at least make it clear to the reader. The scriptorium would tell you about where you store your sources, which would probably Mendeley, what they would talk about, because I don't know, some sort of a deal. This is what I use, citethisforme.com. You can just fill in the sources and then you say what citation style. It really helps if you don't have to write everything down yourself, because it's really lame and it's one of the most boring parts of writing anything, the sources. So I hope this will help. And otherwise Mendeley, and you have other systems, EndNote, that sort of stuff. Also something else you can justify, the text. I think this looks more